Hi everyone. ഇന്നത്തെ വീഡിയോയിൽ നമ്മൾ ഡീൽ ചെയ്യുന്നത് ഡിസംബർ 2021 ആൻഡ് ജൂൺ 2022 സൈക്കിൾസ് മെർജ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ള NTA UGC നെറ്റ് ഇംഗ്ലീഷിൻ്റെ ഈവനിങ് ഷിഫ്റ്റിൻ്റെ ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ പേപ്പറിൻ്റെ ഒരു ഡിസ്കഷനും അതിൻ്റെ ഒരു അനാലിസിസും ആണ്. സോ ഈ ഒരു ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ പേപ്പറിനെ കുറിച്ച് നമ്മൾ ഒരു ബ്രീഫായിട്ട് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അതിൻ്റെ ആ ഒരു സമ്മറി വെച്ച് നമ്മൾ പറയുവാണെങ്കിൽ പറയാനുള്ള ഒരു കാര്യം എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ മോർണിംഗ് ഷിഫ്റ്റിനേക്കാൾ കുറച്ചുകൂടി നമുക്ക് കാറ്റഗറൈസ് ചെയ്യാൻ എളുപ്പമുള്ള ഒരു ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ പേപ്പർ ആയിരുന്നു ഈവനിങ് ഷിഫ്റ്റ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. മോർണിംഗ് ഷിഫ്റ്റ് പോലെ തന്നെ ഡയറക്റ്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള അതും വളരെ സ്ട്രെയിറ്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസ് ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. പക്ഷേ ടു മച്ച് ഓഫ് ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻസ് നമുക്ക് പോസ്റ്റ് കൊളോണിയൽ ലിറ്ററേച്ചർ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഈ പറയുന്ന പോലെ ഇന്ത്യൻ ലിറ്ററേച്ചർ, റീജിയണൽ ലിറ്ററേച്ചറിന് ഒരു ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻസ് കൊടുക്കുന്നതായിട്ട് നമുക്ക് കാണാനായിട്ട് പറ്റും. പിന്നെ അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ലിറ്റററി തിയറിയിൽ നിന്നും ഒരുപാട് ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസുകൾ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. പക്ഷേ ഓവറോൾ നമ്മൾ ആ ഒരു ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ പേപ്പറിൻ്റെ ഒരു പാറ്റേണും കാര്യങ്ങളും നോക്കുവാണെങ്കിൽ ഒരു ആവറേജ് ടു നമുക്ക് ഒത്തിരി ഹാർഡാണെന്ന് പറയാൻ പറ്റില്ലാത്ത ഒരു ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ പേപ്പർ ആയിരുന്നു. പിന്നെ അതുപോലെ തന്നെ നമ്മൾ ഈ ഒരു ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ പേപ്പറിൻ്റെ ഒരു ഫുള്ളായിട്ട് നമ്മൾ അനാലിസ് ചെയ്ത് കഴിയുമ്പോൾ അടുത്തൊരു തവണ നമ്മൾ പ്രിപ്പയർ ചെയ്യുമ്പം നമ്മൾ മനസ്സിൽ വെക്കേണ്ട കാര്യം എന്താണെന്ന് ചോദിച്ചു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ നമ്മൾ കുറച്ചും കൂടി ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻസ് ഈ പറയുന്ന ഇന്ത്യൻ ലിറ്ററേച്ചർ അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ഈ വളരെ പ്രിസൈസ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള റീജിയണൽ ലിറ്ററേച്ചർ, കാരണം നമ്മളിപ്പം ഒരു ഇന്ത്യൻ ലിറ്ററേച്ചർ പഠിച്ചാലും വളരെ റാൻഡം ആയിട്ടുള്ള അല്ലെങ്കിൽ വളരെ പോപ്പുലർ ആയിട്ടുള്ള റൈറ്റേഴ്സിനെയാണ് നമ്മൾ കൂടുതലായിട്ടും പഠിക്കാനായിട്ടുള്ള ചാൻസസ് കൂടുതൽ. അങ്ങനെ നോക്കാതെ ഇന്ത്യൻ ലിറ്ററേച്ചർ ആസ് സച്ച് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ പോസ്റ്റ് കൊളോണിയൽ ലിറ്ററേച്ചർ ആസ് സച്ച് നമ്മൾ എടുത്തിട്ട് അതിൽ കുറച്ചുകൂടി കോൺട്രിബ്യൂഷൻസ് കൊടുക്കുന്ന മേജർ ആൻഡ് മൈനർ റൈറ്റേഴ്സിൽ നിന്നെല്ലാം ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസ് വരാനായിട്ടുള്ള ചാൻസസ് കൂടുതലാണ്. ബട്ട് ആ ഒരു കേസിലും നമ്മൾ പറയുന്നത് പോലെ നമുക്ക് NTA ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസ് ടു മച്ച് നമുക്ക് ഒരിക്കലും പ്രെഡിക്റ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റില്ല. എല്ലാ എക്സാംസും ഡിഫറെൻ്റ് ആയിട്ട് വരാനായിട്ടുള്ള ചാൻസസ് കൂടുതലാണ്. പക്ഷേ യു ഹാവ് ടു ഗിവ് മോർ ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻസ് ടു ഇന്ത്യൻ ലിറ്ററേച്ചർ ആൻഡ് റീജിയണൽ ലിറ്ററേച്ചർ ഇൻ കേസ് ഇതേ പാറ്റേണിൽ തന്നെയാണ് അടുത്തൊരു എക്സാം വരുന്നതെങ്കിലും. പിന്നെ അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ഫിക്ഷൻ ആയാലും പോയട്രി ആണെങ്കിലും പ്ലേസ് ആണെങ്കിലും വളരെ പോപ്പുലർ ആയിട്ടുള്ള പ്ലേസ് മാത്രമായിരുന്നില്ല ഈ എക്സാംസിന് ചോദിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരുന്നത്. മൈനർ പ്ലേസും മേജർ പ്ലേസും ഇത് രണ്ടും അല്ലെങ്കിൽ മൈനർ ആൻഡ് മേജർ വർക്ക്സുകളെല്ലാം ഫിക്ഷൻ ആയാലും പോയട്രി ആയാലും ഡ്രാമയാണെങ്കിലും അതിൻ്റേതായിട്ടുള്ളൊരു ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻസ് ഈ ഒരു എക്സാമിൽ രണ്ട് ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ പേപ്പറിലും നമുക്ക് കാണാനായിട്ട് പറ്റും. എനിവേ ഇന്നത്തെ വീഡിയോയിൽ നമ്മൾ ചെയ്യുന്നത് ഈ പറയുന്ന ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ പേപ്പറിനെ കാറ്റഗറൈസ് ചെയ്ത് അതിനെ നമ്മളൊന്ന് അനാലിസ് ചെയ്ത് അതിൻ്റെ ഫൈനൽ ആൻസർ കീ വെച്ച് ആൻസർ നമ്മൾ പറഞ്ഞു പോവുകയാണ്. സോ ഇവിടെ ദ തിങ് ഈസ് ദാറ്റ് നമ്മൾ ഈ ഒരു ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ പേപ്പറിനെ കാറ്റഗറൈസ് ചെയ്യുമ്പോഴത്തേക്കും നമുക്കറിയാം ഇംഗ്ലീഷിൻ്റെ സിലബസ് വാസ്റ്റ് ആയതുകൊണ്ട് അതിൻ്റെ കാറ്റഗറൈസേഷൻ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് അത്ര സിമ്പിൾ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു കാര്യമല്ല. കാരണം ഓപ്ഷൻസ് ആയാലും ഇപ്പം മാച്ച് ദ ഫോളോയിങ് ഒക്കെ ആണെങ്കിലും ഈ പറയുന്ന ഒരു ക്രോസ് ഓവർ വരാനായിട്ടുള്ള ചാൻസസ് കൂടുതലാണ്. സോ ഒരു റഫ് കാറ്റഗറൈസേഷനിലായിരിക്കും നമ്മൾ ഈ ഒരു വീഡിയോ ചെയ്യുന്നത്. So in this video we will be dealing with NTA UGC Net English December 2021 and June 2022 cycles merged evening shift of this year. So at first let's have a look on, okay, in this video we have categorized the questions into different topics. So before moving into this video, one thing I want you to keep in mind is that this categorization, it cannot be considered as official. This is just for a proper understanding, because we know that from December 2018 NTA has revised the syllabus, but they have added certain modules while they have reduced certain modules, and also there were certain many differences that in the syllabus we have did a video on the change in the syllabus. So here we actually have merged these both the syllabus in order to get a good categorization. So the categorization, it is just a rough thing, because most of the questions you can find that the options or the questions like the match the following, it has got different writers from different nationalities or different modules. So it's a rough categorization. So first let's have a look on the questions that were asked from literary criticism. Okay, so let's look at the questions that were asked from literary criticism. So first one, it ought to be the first endeavor of a writer to distinguish nature from custom, or that which is established because it is right from that which is right only because it is established. that he may neither violate essential principles by a desire of novelty, nor debar himself from the attainment of beauties within his view by the needless fear of breaking rules which no literary dictator had authority to enact. So here, this is an extract taken from a critical work. So here, let's look at the question. The above passage considered to be the death knell of neoclassical criticism. It is attributed to. So here the options are John Dryden, Alexander Pope, Samuel Johnson and Joseph Addison. So the correct answer is option C, Samuel Johnson. It is Samuel Johnson who has written the extract. So the correct answer is option C, Samuel Johnson. Which of the following statements hold true with respect to Alexander Pope's essay on criticism? So here there are 5 statements given where you have to identify the correct statement regarding or associated to Alexander Pope's essay on criticism. So this also comes as literary criticism because we know that Alexander Pope's essay on criticism is actually a critical work in verse. It is an inquiry into the nature and value of poetry. It's an incorrect statement. It presents a series of generalizations about good taste. That's a correct statement. It explores the challenges of impartial and just criticism. That's also a correct statement. If you look at the essay on criticism in detail, you can find that Alexander Pope has given the qualities of a good critic and bad critic, just critic, etc. So, it underlines the traits of a good critic. That is also a correct statement. It critically reflects on Plato's rejection of poetry. That is an incorrect statement. This rejection of this was given by Sidney. So, the correct answer is B, C and D. So, now let's look at the option. B, C and D comes as option D. So, the correct answer is option D. Now let's look at another question that was asked from literary criticism. Given below are 2 statements. Statement 1, the term negative capability was coined by John Keats. So we have discussed about negative capability and John Keats earlier in our video. So the term negative capability, it was coined by John Keats in a letter that was written by him. So the correct answer is, the statement 1 is true. About statement 2, while analyzing the term dissociation of sensibility, T.S. Eliot proclaims that Hamlet is an artistic failure. This statement is incorrect. Actually, dissociation of sensibility dissociation of sensibility is actually a term used by T.S. Eliot, but that was not to, not to analyze or not to criticize Hamlet. For Hamlet, he used the term objective correlative. So we have to say that statement 1 is true while statement 2 is false. Okay, so here the correct answer is option C. Statement 1 is true, but statement 2 is false. So the correct answer is option C. Now let's look at the next question. Who among the following refers to high seriousness as a quality of a great poet and quotes John Milton to prove the same? So here, this is actually from Victorian age of literary criticism. It's actually these all questions you have to say that it's really direct questions, because if you know the critic who is associated with the term high seriousness, this is really an easy question, and we know that high seriousness is often associated with Matthew Arnold. Okay, high seriousness is often the term associated with Matthew Arnold. So, in the 5 options, Matthew Arnold is the correct answer. Yeah, and we have that as an option D, see you later. So, the correct answer is Matthew Arnold is associated with high seriousness. Next question. Inane gaudiness is a phrase used in connection with neoclassicism by. Inane gaudiness is a phrase used in connection with neoclassicism. Actually, inane gaudiness, this term was actually used by William Wordsworth in his preface to Lyrical Ballad, where he says that he is actually dissatisfied with this gaudiness and inane phraseology of the Enlightenment age or of the 18th century verse, and he was inspired by his travels in the revolutionary France. So this we can find that William Wordsworth, he saw the role of a poet as a man speaking to men, where there should be more understanding rather than strictly adhering to this neoclassical values, neoclassical rules. So he wanted to be someone who could capture everyday people and everyday events in an everyday language. So that is where he uses the term inane gaudiness. So inane gaudiness is actually a derogatory term term that he used to describe the verses written in neoclassical period or in the Enlightenment period. So that is why he said he was dissatisfied with this gaudiness and inane phraseology of the 18th century verse. So the correct answer is option A, William Wordsworth. Now let's look at the next question. Given below are two statements. The best poetry will be found to have a power of forming, sustaining and delighting us as nothing else can. The best poetry will be found to have a power of forming, sustaining and delighting us as nothing else can. So this is actually a statement said by Matthew Arnold in Study of Poetry. So we have to say that the statement 1 is correct. Statement 2, no man has ever been a great poet without being at the same time a great critic. So this is actually a statement given by Coleridge in his work, but the thing is that there is quite a change here. According to Coleridge, the statement is no man has ever been a great poet without being at the same time not a great critic but a profound philosopher. So that is the word used by it is not, according to Coleridge, it's not a great critic, but it should be a profound philosopher. So we have to say that statement 1 is true, but statement 2 is false. So it comes as option C. Now, moving on to the next question. Given below are two statements. Dr. Johnson. So here again, this is another question from Samuel Johnson. So we have already discussed about a question from Samuel Johnson. So here, Samuel Johnson, he comes as an Enlightenment age critic of literary criticism. So Dr. Johnson had an inclination toward the Tory political ideology. Dr. Johnson strongly believed in transcendental skepticism. Okay, so statement 1 is Dr. Johnson had an inclination towards the Tory political ideology. That is a correct statement. Statement 2 is Dr. Johnson strongly believed in transcendental skepticism. That is also a true statement. So both statement 1 and statement 2 are true. So that is option A. Now moving to the next question. Who defined hamartia as a tragic flow? Who defined hamartia as a tragic flow? Aristotle, Dr. Samuel Johnson, Matthew Arnold and A.C. Bradley. So we have option A, Aristotle, because we know that hamartia, catharsis, all these philosophies or all these concepts are normally associated with Aristotle in his work Poetics. So the correct answer is option A, that is Aristotle. So these are the questions that were asked from literary criticism. So if you look at this pattern, you can find that some of these questions were asked very directly, while for example, if you have a good look on this essay on criticism, you can answer the questions of you can answer the questions of T.S. Eliot or Alexander Pope. So these were all very direct questions. Some questions were quite twisted. Anyway, these are the questions that were asked from literary criticism. Now, let's look on to the next module or next topic, that is literary theory. The first question that was asked from literary theory is that it's a match the following question where you have to identify the year of publications of these famous works. So here all these works, The Empire Writes Back, Nation and Narration, Culture and Imperialism, The Twice Born Fiction, all these things you can find that these all belongs to post-colonial theory. Okay, so it comes under literary theory and it comes under post-colonial theory. So let's have a look. The Empire Writes Back. The Empire Writes Back was published in the year 1989. It was first published in the year 1989, and we know about Empire Writes Back. It was written by three writers. It's a collaboration of three writers, Bill Ashcroft, Gareth Griffiths and Helen Tiffin. So it's Empire Writes Back 1989 by Ashcroft, Griffiths and Tiffin. Then Nation and Narration. Nation and Narration was published in the year 1990. Nation and Narration was published in the year 1990 and it was written by Homi K. Bhabha. It's a post-colonial work of Homi K. Bhabha. Culture and Imperialism, we know it's a work of Edward Said. It was published in 1993. Okay, Culture and Imperialism, Edward Said, 1993. The Twice Born Fiction, It's actually an Indian work. It was published in the year 1971 by Meenakshi Mukherjee. So now let's look at the option. The Empire Writes Back. A can be associated with 3. A is equal A 3, nation and narration. B 1, culture and imperialism. 2, D finally 4. So that's the answer. So now let's look at the option. Yeah, the option comes as option B, A3, B1, C2 and D4. So that is answer B. Okay, so that is the answer. Now let's look at the next question. Find the chronological order of publication of the given works. Find the chronological order of the publication of the given works. Mythologies of grammatology, culture and society, blindness and insight, and the location of culture. So these are the works. This also comes, and if you look at the works, it's actually, it is from literary theory, but the works are of different theories. It comes under post-structuralism and also from cultural studies. So mythologies, we know it's a 1957 work written by Roland Barthes. Okay, mythologies, it's a 1957 work written by Roland Barthes. Of grammatology, obviously we all know it's a 1967 book written by Derrida. It's a book written by Jacques Derrida, the French philosopher. Culture and society, it was written in the year 1958 by the Welsh progressive writer Raymond Williams. Blindness and Insight, it's actually written in the year 1983, and it is written by this Belgian-born literary critic and literary theorist Paul de Man. You might be familiar with him. And the location of culture, it's a 1994 work written by Homi K. Bhabha. So if you look at his, I'm once again repeating it, Mythologies was written in the year 1957 by Roland Barthes. Of Grammatology, 1967 by Jacques Derrida. Culture and Society, 1958 by Raymond Williams. Blindness and Insight, 1983 by Paul de Man. The Location of Culture, 1994 by Homi K. Bhabha. So here the chronological order would be mythology, culture and society, of grammatology, blindness and insight, and the location of culture, A, C, B, D, E. Now let's look at the option. A, C, B, D, E comes as option B. It comes as option B. So the correct answer is option B, where you have to identify the chronological year of the publications. Which of the following are the premises of post-colonial criticism? Which among the following are the premises of post-colonial criticism? Again, this comes as a, if you know what post-colonial literature is or what post-colonial theory is, it would be really easy for you to answer this question. Now let's look. You have to identify the correct statements. It rejects the claims of universalism made in the canonical Western literature. It rejects the claims of universalism made in the canonical Western literature. That's a correct statement. They wanted to avoid the so-called established binary oppositions made by the canonical Western literature. That's a correct statement. It foregrounds the questions of cultural difference and diversity as represented in literary texts. That is also a correct statement. It acts on the principles of peaceful coexistence. That cannot be considered as a correct statement because there were many nations or there were many post-colonial criticism that believed in violence or that believed in revolution and rebellion in order to gain the land back. It celebrates hybridity and cultural polyvalency. That's also a correct statement. It resists any attempt at homogenization based on race, class, and nationality. That is also a correct statement. So we have to say that A, B, D, and E are correct statements. A, B, D, and E comes as option B. So the correct answer is option B. Next one is, which of the following is not a kind of sign as suggested by Charles Sanders Peirce? Okay, so here we know that C.S. Peirce, he belongs to structuralism of literary theory, and according to him, there are three types of signs, or there are three kinds of signs, which are icon, index, and symbol. Okay, visual is not among them. Icon, index, and symbol. I think we have did this video on, video previously. If you have any doubts, you can go through that. You will get a detailed idea of it. So it is icon, index, and symbol. Visual is not among them. So the correct answer is option D. Next question, it's associated with new criticism of literary theory. Which of the following is applicable to new criticism? Which of the following is applicable to new criticism? It draws considerably from the works of I.A. Richards and the critical essays of T.S. Eliot. That is actually a correct, that's actually a correct explanation, because most of new critics, it was associated with I.A. Richards, Clent Brooks, William Emerson, F.R. Lewis, and these was also related to the critical essays of T.S. Eliot. Some of its concepts are preempted by F.R. Lewis. That is also a correct statement. It distinguishes between literary and scientific usage of language. If you look at the concepts of I.A. Richards in detail, you will get that there are two types of languages, literary language, or we can say that emotive language and scientific language. It encourages an extensive exploration of the contextual and autobiographical background of a literary production. That is not a sentence that can be associated with new criticism, because new criticism, in the sense, it means everything is within the text or everything happens inside the text. So there is no use of the autobiographical background or the contextual information. So that's an incorrect statement. It vouches for a historical analysis of a text. That is also an incorrect statement, because new criticism, it is associated with close reading of the text, nothing outside the text. So A, B and C are correct statements. So that is option A. A, B and C only. Next question, which of the following statements are true about reader response criticism? Which of the following statements are true about reader response criticism? It challenges the notion that the meaning is located within the text. It refutes that the author is the originator of the meaning. So, we know about reader response criticism, where you have to identify the correct statements associated with it. It challenges the notion that the meaning is located within the text. That is a correct statement, because it also goes for the, it also goes for the response of a reader. It refutes that the author is the originator of the meaning. That's also a correct statement. It sees the reader as a source of meaning. That is also a correct statement. It treats a text as self-sufficient. No, that's an incorrect statement. If a text is self-sufficient, then what is the role of a reader in it? It appreciates the texts that are historical. That is also an incorrect statement, because in reader response criticism, they completely focus on the emotions, they completely focus on the responses and the gaps of the reader. So, D and E are incorrect. So, we can say that A, B, C are the correct statement. A, B, C. So there is actually a problem with the options where three answers can be regarded to be right. A, B, A, C, A, B and C. So the correct answer is A, B and C. So the three options are correct. Now let's look at the next question. Who among the following is associated with the term intentional fallacy in literary criticism? This is also a very direct question. We know that Wimsatt and Beardsley, they are in their work Verbal Icon, they have created the terms intentional fallacy and effective fallacy. So the correct answer is option A, W.K. Wimsatt. Option A, W.K. Wimsatt. The following statement is given by which of the below mentioned critics? The following statement is given by which of the below mentioned critics? I was indignant. I demanded an explanation. Nothing happened. I burst apart. I was indignant. I demanded an explanation. Nothing happened. I burst apart. So the options are Gayatri Spivak, Homi K. Baba, Stuart Hall and Frantz Fanon. So actually the correct answer is Frantz Fanon. I was indignant. I demanded an explanation. Nothing happened. I burst apart. This is actually a statement given by Frantz Fanon in his work The Fact of Blackness, which he wrote in 1952. So this is by Frantz Fanon. So the correct answer is option D. What are the points of convergence between Derrida and Barthes? What are the points of convergence between Derrida and Roland Barthes? So we know that Roland Barthes, he was a structuralist at the beginning of his career, but when post-structuralism developed, he had an inclination towards post-structuralism. So towards the end of his career, if you look at the works of Roland Barthes, you can find the transition from structuralism to post-structuralism, especially in his work, The Death of the Author. So there were many, since both of them supported the post-structuralism or deconstruct post-structuralism, you have to identify the convergence between them. Both believe in the endless play in language and literary text. That is a correct statement. Both conclude that the meaning of a text is not final. That's also a correct statement. The meaning keeps on postponing. Both constitute that language has a retrospective power. That is an incorrect statement. They believe that no meaning is reliable. That's also a correct statement. They believe that the relationship between words, meaning and text are intrinsic to meaning rather than the word itself. That's also a correct statement. So apart from C, all the other options A, B, D and E are correct. So A, B, D and E comes as option A. So the correct answer is option A. Now let's look at the next question. So here this question, they have given 4 terms or 4 concepts which are associated with different literary theories, but you have to identify them. So the first one is bricolage. So we know about bricolage. I think we have also did a video on bricolage where we know the difference. But bricolage is actually the term used by Levi-Strauss in order to show the difference between the works, mythical works and the modern works by using the distinction between a bricolier and an engineer. So bricolage is commonly associated with Levi-Strauss. Then Dasein. Dasein is actually the German word for existence. And we know that existence is normally associated with Martin Heidegger. So Dasein is a word associated with Martin Heidegger. Then we have parapraxis. Parapraxis is actually a psychoanalytical term which actually refers to a slip of tongue or a or pen, or what we can say forgetfulness or misplacement of objects. So it's actually a psychoanalytical term, and obviously here the psychoanalyst here is Sigmund Freud. So parapraxis is associated with Sigmund Freud. Then polyphony. Polyphony is associated with Mikhail Bakhtin. Okay, polyphony means the multiple voices used in a particular novel. So polyphony is associated with Mikhail Bakhtin. So let's look at the options once again. A, 3, bricolage, Levi-Strauss, Dasein, Martin Heidegger, parapraxis, Sigmund Freud, and polyphony, Mikhail Bakhtin. So A3, B1, C2, D4. A3, B1, C2, D4. That comes as option D. So the correct answer is option D. Next question, again, Carnival, Carnivalus, Mikhail Bakhtin. This is also another video that we have taken previously. So if you have any doubts regarding Bakhtin or Carnivalus, you can go through that video. You will get a detailed idea about it. So which of the following are applicable to the term carnival? It became important through the work of Russian theorist Mikhail Bakhtin. That's a correct statement. It means the way in which popular humor subverts official authority in classical, medieval, Renaissance text and culture. That's also a correct statement, because in a carnival, everything is chaotic. The hierarchy is chaotic. Everything is averted. It overturns the established hierarchy and sets up a popular and democratic counterculture. That's also a correct statement regarding carnival. It brings out the serious elements in literature. No, that's an incorrect statement, because it brings out the humorous elements in literature or chaotic elements in literature. It is used as a critical tool for interpretation of poetry. That is also an incorrect statement, because carnival was normally associated with novels. So we have to say that A, B and C. A, B and C comes as option A. So the correct answer is option A. Which of the following are representative text of gynocriticism? So, gynocriticism, there was a question from gynocriticism in the gynocriticism last year, and we have also did a video on gynocriticism. I will add the link in the description. So, if you have any doubts, you can go through it. So, we know gynocriticism is actually the study of women writing from the perspective of women as a writer apart from a reader. And we know the term gynocritics. I think that was a question that was asked in the previous exam. Who coined the term gynocriticism? It was coined by Elaine Showalter in 1979 to refer to a form of literary criticism that is concerned with women as writers. So here the question is, which among the following works are associated with gynocriticism? So Patricia Mayer's Pax, The Female Imagination, it's a representative text of gynocriticism. Mary Ellman's Thinking About Women, no. Sandra Gilbert and Susan Gubar's The Mad Women in the Attic, yes. Ellen Moyer's literary women, yes. Kate Millet's sexual politics, no. So A, C and D are the texts that are associated with gynocriticism. A, C and D comes as option D. So the correct answer is option D. Identify the post-colonial critics who use the ideas of Lacan, Foucault and Derrida while critiquing Eurocentrism. Identify the post-colonial critics who use the ideas of Lacan, Foucault and Derrida while critiquing the Eurocentrism. So again, this comes under post-colonialism in literary theory. So here the Homike Baba, he uses the ideas of Lacan, Foucault and Derrida. Gayatri Spivak also does the same. Abdul Jan Mohammed, he also does the same. Edward Said, he does the same. But Aimé Césaire, he was different in his approach. Aimé Césaire, we know, he was one of the founders of this negritude movement in Francophone literature. So he was not associated with this sort of criticism. So A, B, C and D, that comes as option A. So the correct answer is A, B, C and D. So now let's look at the next question, question number 22. Given below are two statements. According to Michel Foucault, the French Revolution created grounds for the birth of the clinic. According to Michel Foucault, the French Revolution created grounds for the birth of the clinic. So we know about Foucault, the different concepts of Foucault. Foucault is really important from a literary theory point of view. So the first one is correct. Foucault mentions that the doctors started caring for the body of the patients the way priests cared for the soul of the sinners. The doctors started caring for the body of the patients the way priests cared for the soul of the sinners. So both the statements are true. So both statement 1 and statement 2 are correct. So the correct answer is option A. So the next question, who among the following considers a text as a site of struggle between authority and popular culture? Who among the following literary theorists considers a text as a site of struggle between authority and popular culture? The correct answer is option C, Mikhail Bakhtin. The correct answer is option C, Mikhail Bakhtin. So Mikhail Bakhtin is the one who considered the text as a struggle between authority and popular culture. So the correct answer is option C. Now let's look at the next question. Given below are two statements. Derrida mentions that an aesthetic discourse always involves values and interest independent from a pure and neutral aesthetic realm. Derrida mentions that an aesthetic discourse always involves values and interest independent from a pure and neutral aesthetic realm. So it's about Derrida. And Derrida also says that he believed that the outside influence in assessment of aesthetics always enters as and when philosophers and historians point out the element of truth. So we have to say that this is a question from Derrida, and if you can understand Derrida as a whole about his philosophy, about his different concepts, then you can answer this question. Both these statements are true. Here, both the statement, Derrida mentions that an aesthetic discourse always involves values, interest, independent from the aesthetic realm. That's a true statement. He also believed that outside influence in assessment of aesthetic always enters us and when philosophers and historians point out the element of truth. That's also a correct statement. So both statement 1 and statement 2 are correct. So that is option A. Now let's look at the next question. Which of these is related exclusively with Jacques Lacan? Which of these is related exclusively with Lacan? So we know that Lacan, he comes under psychoanalysis, criticism of literary theory. And Lacan, he considered psychic functions to occur within a universal matrix, and these metrics, the properties of this matrix are real, imaginary and symbolic. Real, imaginary and symbolic, which make up the part of every psychic function. But here the thing is that Lacan, he has also, so here the correct answer would be real, symbolic and imaginary, and id and ego is normally associated with Sigmund Freud. But here the thing is that there is a mistake with the option. So they have given B and C as the correct option. B, D, C and E. B, D, C and E. So there is actually a mistake in the questions and the option. So if anyone who has written option B and C, they would be given the marks. Moving to the next question, according to Gerard Genett, which of the following are types of narrators? So we know about Gerard Genett, he actually belongs to the theory, structuralism of literary theory, and according to him, which are the different types of narrators? So we have, he has got 4 types of narrations according to him. So extra diegetic, that is outside the text, when the narrator is outside the text, so that is extra diegetic, so that is a correct one. Heterodiegetic, that is also a correct one, because in heterodiegetic the narrator is not a character in the story. The narrator is there, but the narrator is not a character in the story. Intradiegetic, that is also correct, but the narrator is inside the text. Homodiegetic, that is also correct, where the narrator is a character in the story. But there is nothing called interdiegetic. So the correct answer is extradiegetic, heterodiegetic, intradiegetic and homodiegetic. A, B, C and D. That also comes as 3 options here. A, B, C and D. That is A, B and C. So if you have written any of these 3 options, A, B and C, they have given you marks. Then given below are 2 statements. Roland Barthes believes that the author is the epitome and culmination of capitalist ideology. According to him, that is a correct statement. He believed that the author is the epitome and culmination of the capitalist ideology. So that is why he believed in the concept of the death of the author. Walter Benjamin, in his The Storyteller, observes that every real story has something useful in it. That is also a correct statement. So both statement 1 and statement 2 are true. That is option A. So these are the questions that were asked from literary theory. So if you look at the questions that were asked from literary theory in detail, you can find that most of the questions can be answered if you have an idea about the theory as such. If you know about deconstruction, or if you know about reader response criticism or new criticism, you will get an idea. You can answer these questions easily. And also there were many questions that were asked very directly, like the 3 signs of CSPers. Similarly, there were many questions that were asked directly, and so literary theory, as I said, or as I always say, it's a most easy thing for you to score marks, because most of the questions are direct. So here also in this entire question paper, you can find that the most easy part is the literary theory. So now let's look on the next categorization, that is non-fiction. So we know that when in December 2018, when they revised the syllabus, they have added this module called non-fiction, and at first it was non-fiction and short stories. Later they changed to fiction and short stories and non-fiction as a single module. So when we study non-fiction, it includes philosophers, it includes Indian English literature, the non-fiction of Indian English writers, the non-fiction of British, American, European and post-colonial writers who doesn't belongs to this literature and also to the certain theories. So now let's look at the few questions that were asked from non-fiction. Women of Palestine and Indian women's struggle deal with Women of Palestine 1982 and Indian Women in Struggle. So this Indian Women in Struggle is actually a feminist work written by Gail Omworth, which was like, we will smash this prison, Indian Women in Struggle. It was published in the year 1980. So it deals with female militancy and political involvement. Female militancy and political involvement. Option B. Given below are 2 statements. Statement 1, Jerome K. Jerome's 3 Men in a Boat is humorous and journalistic in form. Jerome K. Jerome's 3 Men in a Boat is humorous and journalistic in form. So, this Jerome K. Jerome's 3 Men in a Boat, it was published in 1889. It's actually, we cannot call it as a fiction, but it's like an humorous account written by Jerome K. Jerome. He's an English writer about a 2-week holiday, a 2-week boating holiday on the Thames, from Kingston upon Thames to Oxford and then back to Kingston. So, there is a dog that follows him, and that dog is fictional, but all the other things are actually real. So it's and it has also got a sequel, 3 Men on Bummel. And it is about three young men and their dog on a holiday. So both these statements are true. So both statement 1 and statement 2 are true. That is option A. Now let's look at the next question. Who has used the term bowling alone to describe the erosion of community ties in United States? You can say that this is a non-fiction associated with American literature. So bowling alone is actually, it's about there was a collapse and revival of this American community in a 2000 non-fiction book which was written by Robert Putnam. Option D, Robert Putnam. So here Putnam, he survives the decline of the social capital in United States since the 1950s. So here if you look at this bowling alone, you can find that he has described the reduction in all forms of impersonal social intercourse upon which the Americans used to found, educate and enrich the fabric of their social life. So he argues that this undermines the active civic engagement which a strong democracy requires from its citizens. So that is what is bowling alone called as. So bowling alone, the term is used by Robert Putnam. Option D, Robert Putnam. Then another question regarding the non-fiction of British literature. Emblems by Francis Quarles is. Emblems by Francis Quarles is a commentary on Homer's Iliad, a commentary on the volume of biblical illustrations, a commentary on Virgil's Aeneid, a commentary on Thomas More's Utopia. So the correct answer is a commentary on a volume of biblical illustration. So that is the correct answer. So it was originally published in 1635. Emblems by Francis Quarles was originally published in 1635 with having some grotesque illustrations engraved by William Marshall and some others. And here each emblem is actually a chapter like thing. So each emblem, it consists of paraphrases from a passage of scripture expressed in this so-called elaborate or metaphorical language, followed by the passages from the Christian fathers and also concluding with an epigram of 4 lines. So that is how this emblem look like. So it's a commentary on the volume of biblical illustration. So if you look, each emblem, it consists of paraphrases from the Bible, and then this paraphrase, it's actually written in a very ornate language, and also it would be followed by the explanation by these Christian fathers. So the correct answer is option B. Moving to the next question, which of the following are true in the context of phenomenology? So we know about phenomenology. It's a philosophy of experience. Okay, that is, for phenomenology, the ultimate source of all meaning, the ultimate source of all value is the lived experience of the human beings. There is nothing before that, there is nothing after that. All the information that you have in your mind is from your sensory experiences. So all philosophical systems, scientific theories, or we can say aesthetic judgments, all have the status of abstractions from the ebb and flow of the lived world. So which are the concepts that can be associated with phenomenology? It is a form of methodological idealism which seeks to explore human consciousness. That's a correct statement. As a philosophical method, it was developed by Edmund Husserl. That's also a correct statement. Martin Heidegger is one of its leading philosophers. It's a correct statement. Martin Heidegger's approach is essentialist. That is entirely wrong because he is normally associated with existentialism. So option D is wrong. Text is considered purely as an embodiment of the author's consciousness. That is also a correct statement. So A, B, C and E are correct statement. A, B, C and E, it comes as option C. So the correct answer is option C. Then there was a question from the figures of speech. I have added this in non-fiction because there was actually a module called literary devices and terms before December 2018, but then they have removed it. But again, you can find questions asked from this particular topic. So, which among the following are true about the figures of speech? So, figures based on sound, paronomasia. So that is a correct statement. Figures based on sound, paronomasia. Figures based on construction, zeugma. That is also a correct statement. Figures based on imagination, Irony is not something that is based on imagination. Irony, we can say that figures based on imagination can be personification. Personification is a figure based on imagination, or hyperbole, pathetic fallacy. These are all figures based on imagination. Figures based on association, chiasmus, that is also not a correct statement, because chiasmus is actually a figure of speech in which two what can we say, two key ideas or two key of ideas of a sentence flipped up in the second sentence. For example, we forget what we want to remember and we remember what we want to forget. So here you can find that the ideas have been flipped in these sentences. So we forget to live and we live to forget. Similarly, so such types of flipping of the first phrase in the second phrase, that is what is called as chiasmus. So that is also not a correct statement. Figures based on association would be normally allusion, metonymy, synecdoche. So these are the correct things. Figures based on indirectness, euphemism, that is also a correct statement. So A, B and E are the correct statement. A, B and E comes as option A. So the correct answer is option A. Then we have another non-fiction question that was asked from Indian literature. Perumal Murugan. So these Adivasi will not dance, the weave of my life, one part women, the presents we brought. If you look at this all, you can find that most of the writers are associated with Dalit movement or the marginal writing. So here if you look, Perumal Murugan, he has written the work about Perumal Murugan. He is an Indian author, a scholar, a literary chronicle who normally writes in Tamil. He is the author of the work One Part Women. Okay, he is the author of the book One Part Women. Then Hansda Savendra Shekhar, he is also an Indian writer who is normally associated with the Adivasi groups of India. He writes about the Adivasi groups of India. And then we have Baby and Hansda Savendra Shekhar, he has written the work Adivasi Will Not Dance. Then we have Baby Kamble. Baby Kamble has written the work The Presents We Brought. She is also an Indian actor, a social activist, and she was born into the largest untouchable group in Bombay. So, I mean, she was a well-known Dalit activist. You might be familiar with Kamble. And she was inspired by B.R. Ambedkar. So, you can find their relevance almost from that time. Then Urmila Power, she is the author of the work The Weave of My Life. So she is also an Indian writer and activist in Dalit and female movement. So Perumal Murugan, One Part Women, Hansda Savendra Shekhar, Adivasi Will Not Dance, Baby Kamble, The Presents We Brought, Urmila Power, One Part Women. So A3, B1, C4, D2. A3, B1, C4, D2 comes as option B. So the correct answer is option B. So these are the questions that were asked from non-fiction. So once again, I'm repeating it. Non-fiction questions are the questions that are asked, that can be asked from British literature, American literature, European literature, post-colonial literature, Indian English literature, about the philosophers like Rousseau, Immanuel Kant, John Locke. So all these sorts of non-fictional writings associated with literature is something that is important here. The next topic is research methodology. So there were few questions asked from research methodology. So now let's look at the questions. Who among the following was a major advocate of oral history? Who among the following was a major advocate of oral history? Sylvia Plath, Esther Greenwood, Paul Thompson and Caroline Steedman. So the correct answer is option C, Paul Thompson. So Thompson is regarded as the pioneer of oral history as a research methodology. That means where you have to give credit or credibility to the oral evidences of the work. So the correct answer is option C, Paul Thompson. Which of the following statements are true about ethnographic research method? Which of the following statements are true about ethnographic research method? It enables the exploration. So here if you look at this ethnographic research method, it's actually a qualitative method where the researchers or where the researchers or the participants, they observe and or interact with a studies participant in the real life environment, where we go to them and then study them in their real life environment. So that is ethnographic research method. Then you have to identify the correct statements regarding ethnographic research method. It enables the exploration of the consumption of literature within defined social and historical settings. Janice A. Radway's Reading the Romance is one of the first examples of the use of ethnographic research methodology. That is also a correct statement. It is perceived as an act of uncovering an objective reality. That is also a correct statement. Reading National Geographic by Catherine A. Lutz and Jane L. Collins makes effective use of ethnographic research method to find out the role of the magazine National Geographic in molding Americans' awareness of the world beyond the United States. That's also a correct statement. It focuses more on objective data than subjective interpretation of the materials. That's an incorrect statement, because while you are there studying their real life in their real life environment, it's not about objective, it's normally about the subjective. So the answer is so the incorrect statement is option E. So A, B, C and D only, that comes as option D. So the correct answer is option D. Now let's look at the next question. Which of the following is not a method of data analysis? Which of the following is not a method of data analysis? And the correct answer is, we have the option qualitative method, quantitative method, mixed method and subjective method. And the correct answer is subjective method. So that comes as option D. So the correct answer is option D. Now, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, postscript to The General in His Labyrinth, about Simon Bolivar's last and terrible journey to the Caribbean coast of Nueva Granada in 1830, is one of the finest examples of. It is a finest example of reading archive and using its contents. Reading archive. So, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, he has written a postscript to the General in His Labyrinth about Simon Bolivar, about his last and terrible trip to Caribbean coast. So, this is an example of reading archive and using its content. So, that comes as option A. So the correct answer is option A. So these are the questions that were asked from research methodology. Now, so when you study about research methodology, most of the questions are like applicable questions. Well, if you know about the different types, you have to understand what that it is in order to get this answer correct. Now moving on to the next categorization, we will be looking on the British literature and the questions exclusively from drama. So here, as I said earlier, these categorizations, it's just a rough categorization, because in the options you can find a play, you can find a fiction, you can find a non-fiction. So, but still, if the answer is related to drama or plays, because I have given this division because we know the first module is drama, where you have to study British literature, the dramas of British literature, American, post-colonial, European and Indian English literature. So now let's look about the dramas or the plays that were asked from British literature. Sir David Linsday's Satire of Three Estates is based on. So, David Linsday's Satire of Three Estates, it's actually a satirical morality play written in Middle Scots, written by Sir David Linsday. So, this is actually an attack on the three estates represented in the Parliament of Scotland. So, the clergy, the lords and the burgh representatives, and the clergy is coming for the strongest criticism. So, we can find that it's actually the Sir David Linsday's Satire of Three Estates is both political, because it comes as the Parliament of Scotland, and then religious, because the main attack is on the clergy. So the correct answer is option A. Then, next question. Given below are two statements. The theatre was at a greater popularity in 18th century England. The theatre was at a greater popularity in 18th century England. We know that it's an incorrect statement, because 18th century England, in the sense that's Enlightenment age, where the Licensing Act was produced with the play of Henry Fielding. So most of the writers, including Henry Fielding, they turned to novels. So it was a time of the development of novels. So the theatre was not at its greatest popularity. The theatre was at its greater popularity during the Elizabethan age, but not during the 18th century or the Enlightenment Day. So statement 1 is false. Statement 2, theatre had court patronage in and around London. That's a correct statement. So in the light of the above statements, you have to correct. So we have to say that statement 1 is false and statement 2 is true. So statement 1 is true, statement 2 is false. That comes as option D. Okay, statement 1 is false, but statement 2 is true. Option D. Now moving to the next question, Dev Viraswamy's Taufan. Dev Viraswamy is actually a politician, a playwright, a poet. He is an advocate of the Mauritian Creole language. So his adaptation of which Shakespearean play is Taufan. So we know that Taufan, the word itself stands for wind. So the play that is associated with wind is The Tempest. Okay, so the correct answer is option D, that is The Tempest. Now there comes another question where there you have to identify the statement with the play. So there is no art to find mind's construction in the face. There is no art to find mind's construction in the face. So this is actually a statement. Statement in Macbeth. There is no art to find mind's construction in the face. Macbeth. Time out of joint. Richard the time out of joint is Hamlet. Time out of joint is Hamlet. The better part of valor is discretion. The better part of valor is discretion. That is Twelfth Night. And my kingdom for a horse is Richard the Third. So once again, there is no art to find mind's construction in the face. Macbeth. Time out of joint Hamlet. The better part of valor is discretion. Twelfth Night, my kingdom for a horse, Richard the Third. So A3, B1, C4, D2. A3, B1, C4, D2. That comes as option B. So the correct answer is option B. So the next question, the concept of eugenics find its illustration predominantly in the writings of. The concept of eugenics finds its illustration predominantly in the writings of. So here, if we speak about eugenics, we can say that this is like a scientifically erroneous or an immoral theory of racial improvement and or this planned breeding. Okay, this was something that gained popularity during the early 20th century, and this eugenics, that means the people who believed in these concepts of eugenics, they believed that they could perfect human beings and eliminate the so-called social ills through genetics and hereditary. So this illustration can be found in the writings of George Bernard Shaw and Eugene O'Neill. George Bernard Shaw and Eugene O'Neill. Man and the Superman, all these you can find the concepts of eugenics, B and C. So B and C comes as option C. So the correct answer is option C. Now comes another question where you have to identify the characters of the plays with their respective plays. So Doll Common is actually a character in Alchemist. Doll Common is a character in Ben Jonson's Alchemist. Then we have Malvolio. Malvolio is a character in Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. Malvolio is a character in Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. Mortimer is a character in Marlowe's Edward II. Roger Mortimer is a character in Marlowe's Edward II. And Bozala is a character in Webster's The Duchess of Malfi. So, Doll Common, Alchemist, Malvolio, Twelfth Night, Mortimer Edward II, Bozala, the Duchess of Malfi. A2, B1, C4, D. A2, B1, that is option B. That comes as option B. So the correct answer is option B. So these are the questions that were asked from plays. Okay, so why I have categorized as plays fiction is because according to the new syllabus, rather than the nationality, the importance is given to the writings, or importance is given to the the genre of the work. So that is why I have given a detailed thing. So the next category is poetry in British literature. So we will be dealing with the questions that were asked from poems or poetry collections from British literature. So the first question, the elegy written in a country churchyard is written in. So we know that the elegy written in a country churchyard, it's a poem by Thomas Gray, which was completed in 1750 and which was first published in 1751. And we know that Thomas Gray, he was partially inspired by the thoughts of the death of his favorite friend, that is Richard West, in 1742. Here the question is, the elegy written in country churchyard is written in dash format. So the correct answer is quatrains of 10 syllable lines. It is written in the form of quatrains of 10 syllable lines. So the correct answer is option A. 46. The predominant emotion running through the poem Christina by Robert Browning is that. The predominant emotion running through the poem Christina. So Christina is actually a poem written by Robert Browning, and this is actually a poem that comes under the collection Dramatic Lyrics. So this Dramatic Lyrics is a collection by Robert Browning, which was published in 1842. And if you look at this Dramatic Lyrics, there were many famous poems that comes under this collection, like My Last Duchess, Porphyra's Lover. These all comes under this Dramatic Lyrics. And similarly, Christina, this is also a dramatic monologue lyric which is spoken by the narrator. And here, as usual, the listener, he's an unnamed, unspoken listener or the reader, and he tells the complex story about his relationship. So here, the speaker, he is in love with a woman who has rejected him. So he is now suffering from a broken heart. He is heartbroken. He is torn between love, grief, and anger because she has rejected him. So the reader, he is able to trace this emotional twists and turns of the speaker's pain. So here the question is, the predominant theme that is running in Christina by Robert Browning is love. So the correct answer is option C, love. Hudibras of Samuel Butler reflects on the revolt again. So, Hudibras of Samuel Butler, he belongs to the Restoration age of British literature, and Hudibras and Samuel Butler can be regarded to be just one of the major writers apart from Dryden of this Restoration age. And Hudibras is written in the year 1663, just after Restoration. Okay, in 1660, Charles II, he restored the monarchy, and just after that, in 1663, Butler had written Hudibras, and the action is set in the last years of the interregnum. Interregnum means in the period in which the Britain was ruled by Oliver Cromwell or the Protectorate government, and immediately before the restoration of Charles II. So this was actually a criticism against the Puritanism, because we know about Oliver Cromwell and other Commonwealth government who has got extremely strictly adhering to the Puritan beliefs, where theatres were all closed, they were all banned, the actors were casted away. So this is actually a revolt against the Puritanism. So the correct answer is option A. Who among the following is the author of the Steel Glass? Who among the following is the author of the Steel Glass? The correct answer is the Earl of Surrey, Thomas Sackville, George Gascoigne, and Edmund Spenser. The correct answer is George Gascoigne. So George Gascoigne, he's an English poet. He was a soldier. He was an unsuccessful courtier. He is considered to be one of the greatest poet of the Elizabethan age. Okay, just like Sidney and Spenser, George Gascoigne, he is also regarded to be one of the greatest writers of Elizabethan age, and it is his work that is the Steel Glass. So the correct answer is option C. Moving to the next question. Who among the following coined the term movement? Who among the following coined the term movement? So, the options are F.W. Bateson, F.R. Lewis, J.D. Scott, and I.A. Richard. So, the movement, this is actually associated with a group of poets. So, the movement, it was a term coined by J.D. Scott. It was a term coined by J.D. Scott in 1954. So, J.D. Scott, he was a literary editor of the Spectator of that time. And he used the term movement to describe a group of writers which include the Philip Larkins, Kingsley Amis, Donald Davy, and there are many other writers like Elizabeth Jennings. So he used this term to describe this group of writers. And what was the speciality of these poets were that they if you speak about their poems or if you speak about the characters of their poems, you can find that they wanted to prove the importance of traditional English poetry over the modern American influenced innovations like this confessional poetry or stream of consciousness. So he wanted to, these writers, they wanted to show the importance of the traditional English poetry. So if you look at these members, you can find that they were not anti-modernity, but they opposed the modernist literature, and that was reflected in the Englishness of their poetry. So that is option C, J.D. Scott. So the correct answer is option C, J.D. Scott. Now let's look at the next question. This is where you have to identify the poems with their respective authors. So we have Stephen Spender, W.H. Auden, John Masefield, Edward Thomas. Cargoes consider Adlestrop and the Pylons. Stephen Spender, he is the author of The Pylons. W.H. Auden, he has written Consider. John Masefield is the author of Cargoes, and Edward Thompson is attributed to Adlestrop. So A4, B2, C1, D3. A4, B2. So that is option B. That comes as option B. A4, B2, C1 and D3. Now let's look at the next question. So the correct answer is option B. So now let's look at the next question. Abt Vogler is authored by. Abt Vogler. So we know that Abt Vogler, it's a very direct question. The options are Matthew Arnold, Robert Browning, A.L. Tennyson, none of the above. But the correct answer is Robert Browning. Abt Vogler is a poem written by Robert Browning. So Vogler, he was a composer, he was a musical innovator, and Robert Browning, he speaks about the story of Abt Vogler. So the correct answer is option B, Robert Browning. Okay, so this is also a question from the Victorian age writers about the dramatic monologues. Identify the correct ones among the following. Identify the correct ones among the following. The dramatic monologue ensures the reciprocal dialogue of the narrator. The dramatic monologue ensures the reciprocal dialogue of the narrator. The 19th century poets fully exploited the poetic form of dramatic monologue. The dramatic monologue ensures the reciprocal dialogue of the narrator. That is an incorrect statement, because we know that the dramatic monologue is actually the literary device used by the Victorian age writers, where the narrator or the speaker speaks in the format of a dialogue to a listening reader or to a listening character who does not appear in the work. So it never ensures the reciprocal dialogue of the narrator. The 19th century poets fully exploited the poetic form of dramatic monologue. That's a correct statement, because it was the Victorian age writers who popularized the concept of dramatic monologues. The Poetry of Experience by Robert Langbaum outlines a discussion on dramatic monologue. That's also a correct statement. The linguistic pragmatics make the narcissistic speaker of dramatic monologue speak exclusively. That is also a correct statement. The speaker and the listener in the dramatic monologues of Robert Browning share the same pedestal of communication. No, that's an incorrect statement, because the listener, they are just the listeners. Okay, they are just a vague appearance in this poem. So A and E are incorrect statements. B, C and D are correct statements. So B, C and D comes as option B. So the correct answer is option B. So these are the questions that were asked from poetry of British literature. And our next mode is fiction. So it comes as fiction and short stories. So if you look at the poetry, you can find that the questions are not always about the major poems of the writers, but it's about the minor poems. Okay, just as you put your effort in studying the major works, you also have to put the effort in studying the minor works, and that too of the Victorian age writers, because it's not for just this exam. For previous many exams, you can find that the questions were asked from the major and the minor writers, and poetries are normally asked more from modern age and Victorian age. Okay, so that's all about poetry from British literature. And now let's look at the next categorization, that is fiction of British literature. So as I said, as per the new syllabus, fiction and short stories are added separately. Are added together, but I have given short stories as a separate module here in order to show the importance. So now let's look at the questions that were asked from fiction in British literature. Which of the following works is set in the backdrop of the religious persecution in Mexico? Which of the following works is set in the backdrop of the religious persecution in Mexico? The Power and the Glory, For Who the Bell Tolls, In Our Time, and all the above. So the correct answer is The Power and the Glory. Power and the Glory, it's a 1940 novel by the British novelist Graham Greene. So the Power and the Glory, it is set in the backdrop of the religious persecution in Mexico. So the correct answer is option A, The Power and the Glory. Next question, the voyage and travel of Sir John Manville was written in. So Sir John Manville is actually a contemporary of Chaucer. So he belongs to this age of Chaucer. It's a travel memoir. The voyage and travel of Sir John Manville. It's a travel memoir which circulated between 1357 and 1371. So it is written in which dialect? So the correct answer is Midland dialect. The dialect in which Chaucer wrote his works, East Midland dialect. So the correct answer is option C, Midland dialect. Next one, which one is correctly matched? Heathcliff, Mansfield Park, Maggie Tulliver, The Mill on the Floors, Josiah Bounderby, Wuthering Heights, Fanny Price, Hard Time. So if you look at this, the only correct match that you can find here is Maggie Tulliver. Maggie Tulliver is the sister of Tom in The Mill on the Floors. She is the main protagonist in The Mill on the Floors. And Heathcliff, he belongs to Wuthering Heights. Then Josiah Bounderby, he is a character in Hard Times, and Fanny Price is a character in Mansfield Park. Okay, so Heathcliff, Wuthering Heights, Maggie Tulliver, The Mill on the Floors, Josiah Bounderby, Hard Times, Fanny Price, Mansfield Park. So the correct answer is option B, Maggie Tulliver, The Mill on the Floors. So the correct answer is option B, Maggie Tulliver, The Mill on the Floors. Now let's look at the next question. Which of the following are correct? Okay, so if you look at the, look at the options, you can find that most of these writers are Irish writers. Okay, so this comes under Irish literature or Irish fiction in British literature. You have to identify the correct statement. So the Barrington trilogy, it's written by Roddy Doyle, who is an Irish writer. Then Confessions of an Irish Rebel, that's not a work written by Bram Stoker. It's a work written by Brendan Behan. It's actually Brendan Behan's autobiography, Confessions of an Irish Rebel. C.S. Lewis, The Chronicles of Narnia. You might have seen the movie. The Chronicles of Narnia is written by S. Lewis. Dracula, obviously it's not Brendan Behan. Dracula, we all know it's written by Bram Stoker. Then Artemis Fowl, it's written by Eoin Colfer. So A is correct, C is correct, and E is correct. So A, C, and E. B is wrong and D is also wrong. So A, C, and E. The correct answer is option A. The correct answer is option A, C, and E only. Moving to the next question. Who among the following is exclusively associated with diary writing in English? Who among the following is exclusively associated with diary writing in English? And we know that because during the Civil War and Restoration Age, we study about these diary entries. There are two major diary entries in English literature, Samuel Pepys and John Evelyn. So here, since John Evelyn is not an option, the correct answer is Samuel Pepys. He is known for his diary entries during the Civil War and during the London Fire. So the correct answer is option A, Samuel Pepys. Next question. Which of the following are novels of Irvine Welsh? Which of the following are novels of Irvine Welsh? The Acid House, Trainspotting, Beside the Ocean of Time, Filth, Mavis Belfrage. The Acid House, Trainspotting, Beside the Ocean of Time, Filth, and Mavis Belfrage. So here Irvine Welsh, he is a Scottish writer. So you have to identify the novels written by Irvine Welsh. So here the Acid House, it's written by Welsh. Trainspotting is also written by Welsh. Beside the Ocean of Time, it is actually a novel by another Scottish writer, that is George Mackay Brown. It's written by George Mackay Brown. Similarly, Filth is written by Welsh, and Mavis Belfrage. Mavis Belfrage is Alasdair Gray's novel, only straight novel about love. That is a speciality of Mavis Belfrage. So, apart from Beside the Ocean of Time and Mavis Belfrage, the other three works are written by Irvine Welsh. That is A, B, and D. So A, B and D, it comes as option D. So the correct answer is option D, A, B and D only. Which of the following statements are true in the context of Henry Fielding's Tom Jones? Which of the following statements are true in the context of Henry Fielding's Tom Jones? 1749. Tom Jones is comic and moralistic. That's a correct statement. So we know about Henry Fielding's burlesque novel, Tom Jones, which was published in 1749, and you have to identify the correct statement regarding it. So the first one is correct. Tom and Jones are the main characters of Tom Jones. Obviously, no, that's not a correct statement. Tom Jones is a single person. Tom is caught poaching in neighbor's game preserve. That's also right statement. The history of Tom Jones is the full title of Tom Jones. That's also correct. So we can say that A, C and D are correct. Since B is wrong, E is also wrong. So B and D are wrong. A, C and D only, that comes as option B. So the correct answer is option B, A, C and D only. So these were the questions that were asked from fiction, from British literature. Now let's look on to the next important area, that is post-colonial literature, and you can find that there were many questions that were asked from post-colonial literature and also Indian English literature, where you know that the diasporic culture of post-colonial literature and Indian literature itself belongs to post-colonial literature. So there are many crossovers that you can find in both these literatures. So now let's look at the questions that were asked from post-colonial literature. Gayatri Bahadur is a dash writer. Gayatri Bahadur is a dash writer. So Gayatri Bahadur, she is actually a Guyanese writer. She is actually a Guyanese American writer, and you might be familiar with her work. She is known for her work Coolie Women. That's the most famous work of her, Coolie Women, the Odyssey of Indenture, and it was also shortlisted for the Orwell Prize. Anyway, so Gayatri Bahadur, she is a Guyanese writer, Guyanese American writer. So the correct answer is option D. Moving to the next question, which among the following are correct? So here most of them are either diasporic writers or belongs to this post-colonial literature. George Lamming, Barbados, it's correct answer. Ben Okri, he belongs to Nigeria, that's also correct. Fred de Aguirre, he is not from Australia, he is a British Guyanese poet. Fred de Aguirre, he is a British Guyanese poet. Then Wilson Harris, he also belongs to Guyana. Then Zulfikar Ghosh is not an Indian writer, he is a Pakistani American novelist. So the correct answer is George Lamming from Barbados, Ben Okri from Nigeria and Wilson Harris from Guyana. Fred Aguirre is also from Guyanese. He is also a British Guyanese poet, and Zulfikar Ghosh is a Pakistani American novelist. So A, B and D. So A, B and D comes as option D. So the correct answer is option D. The next question, the Aboriginal Australian poet Oddgaro Nonukel, in her poem We Are Going, examines the impact of colonial conquest and Aboriginal Australians with reference to. So here this Oddgaro Nonukel, she is actually best known for her poetry. She was the first Aboriginal Australian to publish a book of words. Her original name is Kath Walker, and her poem We Are Going, it's actually a collection which was published in 1964, and We Are Going is one poem of this, and this is also the first book to be published by an Aboriginal woman. So here you have to identify the themes or the major impacts that she tries to bring in this poem We Are Going. It examines the loss of Bora ground, that is correct. Loss of Aboriginal identity, that is also a correct statement. Loss of new education, that is not a correct statement. Loss of primitive culture, yes. None of the above, no. Okay, so we have to say that A, B and D. So A, B and D, these are the references in which she examines the impact of colonial conquest on Aboriginal Australians. A, B and D. A, B and D comes as option A. So the correct answer is option A. Then we have Derek Alton Walcott in the poem The Sea is History. Derek Alton Walcott in the poem The Sea is History. He makes a parallel between Derek Alton Walcott in the poem The Sea is History. So it's also a post-colonial writer We know about him. He's a Saint Lucian poet and a playwright. Derek Walcott is really important because he has received the Nobel Prize in 1992 in literature. So here, the See His History is actually, it explores the past and also questions the validity of the idea that history is same as the tribal memory and only exists when recorded canonically, such as in history books or through monuments. So here he makes a parallel between evolution of Christianity and the slavery of blacks. So the correct answer is option D, evolution of Christianity and slavery of the blacks. So the correct answer is option D. So when we study post-colonial literature, Derek Walcott is actually a very common writer that we discussed. But as I said earlier, it's really important to widen the writings of him. Okay, so the correct answer is option D. Next question, Brijvi Lal's Rama's banishment deals with the history of Fiji of a time period of. So it's actually, it deals with the history of Fiji of a time period of 150 years. So Brijvi Lal, he's actually a Fijian historian. So it speaks about the history of Fiji for 150 years. So the correct answer is option C, 150 years. Who among the following has used lines from the Shakespearean play Othello to critique racism in one of his poems? Who among the following has used lines from the Shakespearean play Othello to critique racism in one of his poems? We have Edward Braithwaite, Franz Fanon, Gugiwa, Thiongo. So the correct answer is option C, Derek Walcott. So Derek Walcott has used the lines from, so this actually appears in the poem Goats and Monkeys. So Goats and Monkeys, it's actually a poem written by Derek Walcott in which he refers to the dilemma faced by Othello. But here you can find that Othello is actually a very villainistic character here, but he is actually an allegorical figure with which any black can identify himself because he is competing for the recognition of the white society. So here you can find that he clearly examines the psychological process that Othello goes through while killing Desdemona and all, and the way in which he describes the murder, the way in which he justifies his murder, all this makes him a very traumatic villain. But the thing is that he actually is criticizing racism because all these things are because Othello is a black person. So the correct answer is option C, Derek Alton Walcott, that is Goats and Monkeys. Then let's move on to the next. So before moving to this drama or Indian English literature, what I have to say is that while you are learning this post-colonial literature, one thing that you have to keep in mind is that in this exam, it was not from the most popular writers that they have asked from post-colonial literature, where you have to study in detail, you have to go through all the regional writers, where you have to go through all these marginalized this third world literature. So it's really important to widen the syllabus of post-colonial literature while you cover the topic. The next is about Indian English literature. So just like post-colonial literature, Indian English literature is also very important when it comes to NTA UGC Net English exam, because in the previous two exams you can find many questions asked from Indian English literature, and that also just like post-colonial literature asked from the real extremes. Okay, it's not anything, if even though the work is nothing that is related to English, the questions can be asked. So now let's look at the questions that were asked from dramas of Indian English literature. Uttara Ramacharita by Dash is based on Valmiki's Ramayana. So Uttara Ramacharita by Dash is based on Valmiki's Ramayana. The correct answer is option B, Bhavabudhi. So Basa, Bhavabudhi, Bharavi, Kalidasa, all these are ancient or classical playwrights of Indian literature. So here Bhavabudhi, he is an 8th century scholar of India who is noted for his plays and poetry, which is written in Sanskrit, and his plays are normally considered equal to that of Kalidasa. He takes the same fame as that of Kalidasa, Bhavabudhi. So the correct answer is option B, Bhavabudhi. Uttara Ramacharita by Bhavabudhi is based on Valmiki's Ramayana. So answer is option B, Bhavabudhi. Now identify the correct player. So again, this is a question from ancient Indian literature. Kalidasa Amorgavasa, it's not a correct answer. Amorgavasa is actually a play written by Adi Shankara. Okay, Amorgavasa, it's a play written by Adi Shankara. Uttara Ramacharita, it was written by Bava Bodhi, it's a correct answer. Urubanga, it's written by Basa. Urubanga is actually the an adaptation of, early adaptation of Mahabharata from the point of view of Bhima. Again, speaks about the last fight between Bhima and Duryodhana, not from the perspective of Bhima, from the perspective of Duryodhana. It speaks about the fight between Bhima and Duryodhana. So, Urubanga by Basa. Rajatarangini, Rajashekharan, that's wrong. Rajatarangini is actually a poem written by Kalhana. It's not Rajashekhara, Kalhana. Kada Sarita Sagara, it's written by Somaveda. So, B, C and E are the correct answers. B, C and E are the correct answers. That is option C. So, the correct answer is option C, B, C and E. Next question, which of the following are not by Rabindranath Tagore? Which of the following are not by Rabindranath Tagore? Visarjan, Visarjan is a play by Rabindranath Tagore. Chandoliga is a play by Rabindranath Tagore. Muttadhara is also a play by Rabindranath Tagore. Parinida is actually a novel written by Sharat Chandra Chattopadhyay. It's a novel written by Sharat Chandra Chattopadhyay in Bengal in 1914. And Punarnava is also not written by Rabindranath Tagore. It's actually a Hindi novel written by Hazari Dwivedi. So Parinida and Punarnava, it's not written by Rabindranath Tagore, while Visarjan, Chandoliga and Muktadhara are written by Rabindranath Tagore. So B and C, that's okay. So the question is not the play written by Rabindranath Tagore. So that is D and E, which comes as option C. So the correct answer is option C. Now moving to the next question. In Kannada literature, Vachana movement addressed. In Kannada literature, Vachana movement addressed. So Vachana movement is actually a social reform movement of Karnataka, which started in the 12th century in the Kalyana of this Kalaburgi division. So it was launched to wage a war against the untouchability. So it was a modernist movement of that time against this untouchability. So the correct answer is obviously progressive value. Since untouchability can be associated as a progressive value, against the untouchability can be considered as a progressive value. So the correct answer is option A. It's associated with Vachana. Vachana movement is associated with the progressive values. So these are the questions that were asked from drama of Indian English literature. So the next category is the fiction of Indian English literature, where you were asked from the questions that were asked. The questions were from the novels and the other novels of these Indian English writers. So we have the first question. Which of the following texts coins the slogan Vande Mataram? Which of the following texts coins the slogan Vande Mataram? So the correct answer is option A, Anandamath. Okay, so Anandamath, it's a novel written by Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay. It was published in 1882 based on the Sannyasi rebellion of that time. So it is in this Anandamath that he has written the song Vande Mataram. So the correct answer is option A, Anandamath. Moving to the next question, identify the correct one from the following. Bharati Mukherjee's novels display split in the diasporic subjects. It's a correct statement. Her novels, they display a split in the diasporic subjects. Rohinton mystery belongs to the community of Parsis that fled to India from Persia to escape Islamic persecution. That's also correct statement. Sujata Butt recalls home as a nostalgic memory and longs intensely for it. That's also a right statement. Farrukh Dhondy connects New Delhi and New York to discuss the diasporic experience. That's not a correct statement. Farrukh Dhondy is he was born in Pune and then he migrated to Britain. So it's it's an incorrect statement. Sharat Chandra in his poem In the Third Country wishes to die in India. That's also an incorrect statement. So we can say that A, B and C are correct statements. So here the thing is that this question, it's actually a crossover of Indian English literature and post-colonial literature, since post-colonial literature has this Indian diasporic writers. So the correct answer is A, B and C only. That comes as option B. Okay, so the correct answer is option B, A, B and C only. Moving to the next question, Siddhant Dwant Shankvi, Advaita Kala, Amrit Shetty, Anuja Chauhan. Almost Single, Love Over Coffee, The Zoya Factor, The Last Flamingos of Bombay. So here the four novels, these are, we can say, contemporary novels, and these writers are like just like Chetan Bhagat or Rohinton Mystery. So these writers, they have written these romance novel, and these are all 2000 novels. So for example, if you look, let's look at the option. Siddhant Dwant Shankvi. Siddhant Dwant Shankvi. He is the author of the work The Last Flamingos of Bombay. It was published in the year 2010. Siddhant Dwant Shankvi has written the work The Lost Flamingos of Bombay. It was published in the year 2010. Advait Kala is the author of the book Almost Single. Advait Kala, Almost Single, published in the year 2007. Amrit Shetty is the author of the work Love Over Coffee. Love Over Coffee, which was published in the year 2010. And Anuja Chauhan is the author of Zoya Factor. You might have heard of Zoya Factor because there was a movie, a Hindi movie in which Dulquer Salman acted regarding how a girl became the lucky charm of a World Cup cricket team. So, Anuja Chauhan, The Zoya Factor. So, once again, Almost Single, written by Advait Kala. Love Over Coffee, written by Amrit Shetty. The Zoya Factor, written by Anuja Chauhan. The Lost Flamingos of Bombay, written by Siddhant Dwant Shankvi. So B1, C2, D3, A4. So the correct answer is option D, A4, B1, C2 and D3. So the correct answer is option D. Moving to the next question, the following statement is written by which of the authors given below? The following statement is written by which of the authors given below? Could fulfillment ever be felt as deeply as loss? Could fulfillment ever be felt as deeply as low? This is actually a statement given by Kiran Desai in her work The Inheritance of Loss. Could fulfillment ever be felt as deeply as loss? It's a statement given by Kiran Desai in Inheritance of Loss. So the correct answer is option B, Kiran Desai. Moving on to the next question, which of these books are written by Nirat C. Chowdhury? Which of these books are written by Nirat C. Chowdhury? The Continent of Circe, Principal Upanishads, A Passage to England, Our New Rulers, The Autobiography of an Unknown Indian. So, you have to identify the books written by Nirat C. Chowdhury. So, The Continent of Circe, it's written by Nirat C. Chowdhury. Principal Upanishads, it's not written by Nirat C. Chowdhury. It's actually written by Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan is the author of Principal Upanishads. A Passage to England, also written by him. Our New Rulers is not written by Nirat C. Chowdhury. The Autobiography of an Unknown Indian, yes, that's the first work written by Nirat C. Chowdhury. So, A, C and E are the works written by Nirat C. Chowdhury. A, C and E. The Continent of Circe, Passage to England, The Autobiography of an Unknown Indian. So, A, C and D, it comes as option C. So, the correct answer is option C. Now, moving to the next question. Again, it's a match the following question where you have to identify the writers with their associated fiction. Cornelia Zorabji, we have Krupabai Satinathan, Raj Lakshmi Devi and Kamala Markandaya. And with novels we have Between the Twilights, The Hindu Wife, Nectar in a Sieve and Shaguna. And here again, if we know the work of Kamala Markandaya, that is Nectar in a Sieve, it would be more easy for us to answer. So option D, Kamala Markandaya is associated with Nectar in a Sieve. Okay, so if you look at the options, you can find that there are two options related to, two options which has the right answer, Kamala Markandaya and Nectar in a Sieve. So again, that makes these things easier. Now let's look, Cornelia Zorabji. Cornelia Zorabji, he is the author of the work Cornelia Zorabji, he is the author of the work Between the Twilight. So Cornelia Zorabji, she is actually an Indian woman who writes about women of her country, about the Indian folklore, the Indian customs, etc. So she is the author of Between the Twilight, which was published in 1908. Then Krupabai Satyanathan she's the author. Krupabai Satyanathan, she's the author of Shaguna, the story of native Christian life. Then Raj Lakshmi Devi is the author of The Hindu Wife. Hindu Wife, the subtitle is Or the Enchanted Fruit. It was published in 1876. Then we have Kamala Markandaya, Nectarinaceae. So A1, B4, C2, D3. A1, B4, C2, D3. That comes as option D. So the correct answer is option D. Now let's move on to the next question. Choose the novels that use magic realism as a tool of narration. So it's actually a mixing up of post-colonial and Indian English. So the Shadow Lines, it's actually a novel written by Amitav Ghosh. So Amitav Ghosh is not associated with magical realism. So A is not a novel. B, 100 Years of Solitude. That is actually a work written by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, which is known for its magic realism. So option B, it's magic realism. Midnight Children, that also comes as magic realism by Salman Rushdie. Beloved is actually a novel written by Toni Morrison. It just has got this post-colonial elements. It never uses magic realism. Beloved, it uses magic realism, while Kandabura by Raja Rao, it never uses magic realism. So we can say that B, C and D are the correct options. So option B, C and D only. Moving on to the next question. Given below are two statements. Statement 1, in my remembered village, 1976, M.N. Srinivas highlights the ethnographical details of a village, Ramapura, near Mysore. So, in my remembered village, it is actually an ethnological work written by M.N. Srinivas, and the book is about a villager who lives in a small village named Ramapura in the state of Karnataka, and at that time it was, that is Mysore, and it speaks about the caste issues and all that happens to him at that time. It also emphasized on the importance of economic freedom of the masses required for their overall upliftment. That is an incorrect statement, because in my remembered village, it's not about this economic freedom that he speaks about. He speaks about the caste issues that was prominent during that time. So, statement 1 is true, statement 2 is incorrect. Statement 1 is correct, that is option C. Statement 1 is correct, but statement 2 is incorrect, that is option C. Now coming to the next question. Who first translated the Bhagavad Gita into English? Who first translated the Bhagavad Gita into English? We have S.T. Colebrook, Alexander Duff, Charles Wilkins and Sir William Jones. The correct answer is Charles Wilkins. So Charles Wilkins first translated Bhagavad Gita into English. So about this translation, for many years you can find different questions asked from the translations of Mahabharata, Ramayana and some such types of epic works. So you have to study that in detail. Moving to the next question. Given below are two statements. The Indian English novelist witnessed a warm reception of their writings in Europe, and they proliferated well in India during the 1930s and 1940s. That's a correct statement. The two world wars added an overall sense of gloom and civilizational crisis across the globe, especially in Europe. That is also a correct statement. So, both the statements are true. Statement 1 and statement 2 are true. That comes as option A. Okay, so these are the questions that were asked from fiction in Indian English literature. Now so we have discussed about the questions that were asked from drama, then we discussed about the questions that were asked from fiction. Now let's move on to the questions that were asked from poetry of Indian English literature. So these are some of the poetry collections or poems written by Indian English writers, where you have to match the following works with their respective authors. Okay, so first we have the list of writers: Yasmin Gunatrainin, Itiaz Darkar, Aga Shahid Ali, Eunice de Souza. Then we have the works Postcard from Kashmir. So Postcard from Kashmir, it is a poetry collection written by Aga Shahid Ali in 1991. Similarly, Advice to Women, it's actually a short poem, I think a 12-line short poem written by another Indian writer, Eunice de Souza. And then we have this postcard from God. Again, it's also a collection of poems written by Imtiaz Darkar. Imtiaz Darkar is a Pakistan-born British full-time poet, and it's also a postcard from God. It's a collection of poems written by Imtiaz Darkar in 1994. And this language, this women, it's actually written by Yasmin Gunartrin. Yasmin Gunartrin, who is actually a Sri Lankan writer. So you can find a mixing up of post-colonial and Indian writing. So here, the thing is that postcard from Kashmir, written by Aga Shahid Ali. Advice to women, written by Eunice de Souza. Postcard from God, Imtiaz Darkar. This language, this women, Yasmin Guartan. So if you look at the options, we have A4, B3, C1, D2. The correct answer is option B. The correct answer is option B. So far we discussed about Indian English literature, and we have found so many questions that were asked from Indian English literature. So I'm here taking a minute to explain the types of questions that were asked. So there were questions asked from short stories, there were questions asked from poetry, fiction, drama, there were questions asked in general. So the thing is that you have, while you study Indian English literature for your upcoming NET exam, you have to study more precisely. You have to go through all the classical writers like Kalidasa, Upanishads, about Kalidasa, Mahabharata, epic Upanishads, or Baza, Urubanga. So such types of works have found a place recently for the NET exams. Similarly, you also have to study in detail the literary movements associated with Indian literature. It's not necessary that you are asked questions only from Indian English literature. The thing is that the syllabus, it has got drama, fiction, poetry, non-fiction and short stories. It has never mentioned Indian English. So, because of this vagueness of syllabus, you can expect questions anywhere. You can expect questions from the regional two marginalized writers. So, you have to go through each and everything if you have to get a good mark for Indian English literature. So now let's look at the next category, short stories. So we have The Lion Skin, The Man Who Killed Like Dickens, Rip Van Winkle, The Bride Comes to Yellow Sky. So here we know the Rip Van Winkle, it's a very popular short story, and we know the author Rip Van Winkle, it's written by Washington Irving. So Rip Van Winkle, it's written by Washington Irving. Similarly, we have The Bride Comes to Yellow Sky. That is also a very famous short story written by Stephen it's actually a very famous story written by Stephen Crane. So these two would get you the answers, to the final answer. So now let's look at the other option. The Lion Skin, it's written by W. Somerset Maugham. The Lion Skin is a short story written by W. Somerset Maugham. The Man Who Liked Dickens, it's written by Evelyn Waugh. Rip Van Winkle is written by Washington Irving. The Bride Comes to the Yellow Sea, written by W. Somerset Maugham. So the correct answer is A2, B4, C1, D3. A2, B4, C1, D3, that is option C. So the correct answer is option C. Next question, which among the following is a short story by the Booker Prize winner Geetanjali Sri? Which among the following is a short story by the Booker Prize winner Geetanjali Sri? Kali Jaga, Hamara Shahar Usbaras, Belpatra and Mai. Okay, so this is actually the Booker Prize winner Geetanjali Sri is the author of the short story Belpatra. The correct answer is option C, Belpatra. So these were the three questions that were asked from short stories. Now let's look at the certain questions that were asked from other categories, but these were all just one or two questions. From European literature, there was this question where as a list one, they had given the plays written by Aristophanes, and you have to identify what he revolts against. So we have Arcanians. So Arcanians, it's an attack on the parties involved in war. An attack on the parties involved in war. Similarly, Cloud, Cloud is actually a criticism of the new spirit of philosophical inquiry. Lysisastra, we know it's a government by women. And Wasp, it is an attack. It is an attack on the demagogue. So A, 2, B, 3, C, 1 and D. 4. A2, B3, C1, D4, that comes as option D. So the correct answer is option D. Similarly, there were another question that was asked from European literature. Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha was originally written in. Hermann Hesse Siddhartha was originally written in French, Russian, English, German. French, Russian, English, German. The correct answer is German because we know Hermann Hesse is a German writer, and Siddhartha is actually a 1922 novel by Hermann Hesse which deals with the spiritual journey of the self-discovery of a man named Siddhartha during the time of Gautam Buddha. So the correct answer is option D, German. So these were the two questions that were asked from European literature. And from American literature, we cannot say American literature as such, but since the answer is actually a work of American literature, I have categorized it into American literature. Which of the following works has Santiago as its protagonist? These are all very direct questions. We know the correct answer is Old Man and the Sea. Old Man and the Sea is a novella written by American writer Ernest Hemingway in 1951, which tells the story of Santiago, an aging Cuban fisherman who struggles with a giant marlin far out of the Gulf Stream of the coast of Cuba. So the correct answer is The Old Man and the Sea. So Santiago is the protagonist of the novel, The Old Man and the Sea. Then we have Marsh Piercy's novel, Women on the Edge of Time. Marsh Piercy's novel, Women on the Edge of Time is based on. So here, this Women on the Edge of Time, it's actually considered as a classic of utopian speculative science fiction as well as that of a feminist classic. And one of Piercy's main inspiration of her utopian novel was Plato's Republic. And apart from that, here this Margaret Piercy's novel, Women on the Edge of Time, is based on The Dialect of Sex by Shulamit Firestone. Shulamit Firestone's The Dialect of the Sex. So it's actually the subtitle is The Case for Revolution, Feminist Revolution. It's actually a 1970 book by radical feminist activist Shulamit Firestone. So the correct answer is option A. Marsh Piercy's novel Women on the Edge of Time is based on Shulamit Firestone's Dialect of the Sex. So the correct answer is option A. So the next question is, which of the following authors have been correctly matched with their works? Which of the following authors have been correctly matched with their works? So we have Malcolm Bradbury's The History of Man. That's actually a work written by Malcolm Bradbury. It's actually a campus novel of 1970s. Then we have William Golding, Rites of Passage. That's also correct combination because William Golding has written a sea trilogy and the first work is Rites of Passage. Seamus Heaney's Darkness Visible. Darkness Visible is not a work written by Seamus Heaney. It's actually a memoir written by an American writer, William Styron. William Styron about his descent into depression and his triumph of the victory. So that is Darkness Visible. So it's not by Seamus Heaney, it's by William Styron. Then Dancing at Lughnasadh. Dancing at Lughnasadh is actually a 1990 play written by the dramatist Brian Friel. Then The Norman Conquest. The Norman Conquest is not actually written by Molly Keane. The Norman Conquest is actually a trilogy of plays written in 1973 by Alan Akebon. Okay, so it was not written by Molly Keane. So the correct answers are Malcolm Bradbury, The History of Man, William Golding, Rites of Passage, and Brian Friel, Dancing at Lughnasadh. A, B, and D only. So A, B, and D only comes as option D. So the correct answer is option D. Then this is actually a question that was asked from English in India, and this is the only question that was asked from English in India, the new module in this exam. When did Thomas Macaulay present his Minutes on Education advocating English education in India? So we have discussed, we have done a video on Thomas Macaulay's Minutes. So just go through it, you will get a detailed idea of it. So T.B. Macaulay, he presented his Minutes on Education on 2nd February 1835. On 2nd February 1835. So the correct answer is option B, 2nd February 1835. Moving on to the next question, identify the film or films that were based on Booker winning novels. Identify the film or films that were based on Booker winning novels. So we have Life of Pi. We know Life of Pi is actually a Canadian philosophical novel by Jan Martel, which was adapted to movie. It won the Booker Prize in 2002. It's a 2001 book. It won the Booker Prize in 2002. Similarly, The Remains of the Day, it also won the Booker Prize. We know it's actually written by the Nobel Prize winning author Kazuo Ishiguro. So this was also made into film. Milkman, The Sellout, The Inheritance of Laws. No. So the correct answer is option A and B. Option A and B. Option A and B comes as option B. Okay, option A and B comes as option B. Next is actually a drop question. This question was regarded as a drop question by NTA. So Karl Marx, Levi-Strauss, Michel Foucault, Jean-Paul Sartre, where you have to match the name of the works with the writers. So since there was a mistake in the question and the option, the question was considered to be a drop question. So these are the major questions. And now let's just look at the reading comprehension questions that were. So we know that there were 20 questions that were asked from reading comprehension. So this is the passage. If you want to read the question, you can pause this video, then you can read the passage and then you can move on. So let's look at the question. I will just read the question and the answers. You can later pause the video and work out these questions. Which of the following is closer to what the author means by less ambitious form of literature? Literature responsive to the heightened state of human perception, imaginative literature, artistic literature, and poetry without form and diction. So the correct answer is literature responsive to heightened state of human perception. So the correct answer is option A. According to the author, prose should be socio-political, subjective, as varied as human experience, as visual as other art forms. The correct answer is option C, as varied as human experience. Artistic literature is the representation of facts enhanced by creative illusion, facts transformed by human predilection in an array of forms, facts arranged by political reflection, complex and natural instincts of a poet. Facts transformed by human predilection in the array of forms. So the correct answer is option B. Which of these expressions closely represent the meaning of fervid? Feeling nostalgic, portraying feelings that are too strong, riding strong feelings, expressing humility of attitude. So the correct answer is option B, portraying feelings that are too strong. Option B. In the above passage, Walter Aurelio Pater's statement, imaginative prose should be special, implies the correct answer is option C, intellectual complexities. Intellectual complexity. So that is about the passage. Now this is actually the second reading comprehension is a poem written by Henry David Thoreau titled as Smoke. Henry David Thoreau, Smoke. As I said earlier, if you want to read the poem, you can pause the video and then try to answer the questions. Why does the poet seek pardon from the gods? The correct answer is the speaker admits sin of setting the fire. Option C, the speaker admits sin of setting the fire. Which figure of speech is implicit in light-winged smoke? Which figure of speech is implicit in light-winged smoke? So the correct answer is apostrophe. Light-winged smoke has the figure of speech as apostrophe. Then the poem deals with fire in the forest, fire in the city, fire on the ship, fire in the village. The correct answer is fire in the village. And the word lark in the third line means skylark. Okay, lark is the short form of skylark. Option D. And this question is regarded to be a drop question. In the first line of the poem, Icarian bird connotes. It's considered to be a drop question. So these are the 100 questions that we have found, that were asked for the evening shift of NTA NET UGC NET English December 2021 and June 2022 exams. So the thing that you can find, I have categorized these questions in the most possible way, but the thing is that as you can find Indian English, since the questions are mostly concentrated not on the nationality but on the genres, there comes the the vagueness of the borders between the different nationalities. So the thing is that while you are preparing for your next NTA NET exam, go through the literatures that are not that common, like the post-colonial literature or Indian literature, where the Indian literature, once again I am repeatedly telling you that it's not limited to Indian English literature. Normally we believe that the questions were asked from the writings of Indian writers in English, English, but that's not the case in this exam. There were many questions that were asked from the works that were not even written in English or translated to English. So the thing is that you have to study in detail each and every major and minor works of the writers. So that's about this 100 questions. സോ ഇന്നത്തെ വീഡിയോയിൽ നമ്മൾ ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്തത് ഈ NTA UGC നെറ്റ് ഇംഗ്ലീഷിൻ്റെ ഡിസംബർ 2021 ജൂൺ 2022 സൈക്കിൾസ് മേർജ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ള ഈവനിങ് ഷിഫ്റ്റിൻ്റെ ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ പേപ്പറിൻ്റെ ഒരു അനാലിസിസ് ആയിരുന്നു. നമ്മളതിന് എടുത്തിട്ടുള്ള ആൻസർ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് NTA ഫൈനൽ ആൻസർ കീ ആണ്. 2 ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസ് ഇതിൽ ഡ്രോപ്പ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. അതല്ലാതെ മോർണിംഗ് ഷിഫ്റ്റ് വെച്ച് നോക്കുമ്പോഴത്തേക്കും ഡ്രോപ്പ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസുകൾ വളരെ കുറവായിരുന്നു ഈവനിങ് ഷിഫ്റ്റിൽ. പിന്നെ അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞതുപോലെ നമ്മൾ ഈ ഒരു ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ പേപ്പർ നമ്മൾ അനലൈസ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഈ ഒരു ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ പേപ്പർ നമ്മളതിൻ്റെ കാറ്റഗറി തിരിച്ച് നമ്മളത് നോക്കുന്നത് നമ്മൾ അടുത്തൊരു എക്സാമിന് പഠിക്കുമ്പോഴത്തേക്കും നമ്മൾ ഒരു മൊഡ്യൂൾ എടുത്താലും അതിൽ ഏതൊക്കെ അറ്റം വരെ നമ്മൾ പോയി അതിനെക്കുറിച്ച് ഇൻഡെപ്ത് ആയിട്ട് പഠിക്കണം എന്ന് നമുക്കൊരു ഐഡിയ കിട്ടാനായിട്ടാണ്. കാരണം നമ്മൾ നോർമലി ഇന്ത്യൻ ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് ലിറ്ററേച്ചറൊക്കെ നമ്മൾ പഠിക്കുമ്പോഴത്തേക്കും നമ്മൾ RK നാരായൺ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ KR രാമാനുജൻ അങ്ങനെ വളരെ പ്രൊമിനൻ്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള റൈറ്റേഴ്സിനെ, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഇന്ത്യൻ ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് ലിറ്ററേച്ചറുമായിട്ട് അസോസിയേറ്റ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ള റൈറ്റേഴ്സിനെ പഠിക്കാനാണ് ചാൻസസ് കൂടുതൽ. പക്ഷേ ഇന്നത്തെ ഈ ഒരു എക്സാമിൻ്റെ ഒരു പാറ്റേൺ നമ്മൾ നോക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ നമ്മളത് കുറച്ചുകൂടി നമ്മുടെ സിലബസ് ഒന്ന് വൈഡ് ആക്കിയിട്ട്, നമ്മുടെ ആ ഒരു സിലബസിൻ്റെ ഒരു പ്രിസൈസ്നെസ് കുറവുള്ളത് കൊണ്ടാണ് ആ ഒരു പ്രോബ്ലം വരുന്നത്. സോ നമ്മൾ പഠിക്കുമ്പം ആ ഒരു സിലബസ് കുറച്ചുകൂടി വൈഡ് ആക്കി മാക്സിമം ഒരു ഇൻഫോർമേഷൻസ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ മാക്സിമം ഫാക്ച്വൽ ഡീറ്റെയിൽസ് കളക്ട് ചെയ്ത് പഠിക്കാനായിട്ട് മാക്സിമം ട്രൈ ചെയ്യുക. So that's all about this video. Thank you.